and support. This is one of the areas where we have benefited greatly from in many ways. And Imam Zayd is always reminiscing about the times that they spent, especially that early period, and the struggles and the great challenges that we face. And that's life on earth, is struggles and challenges. I want to just thank a few people. Ahmed Zada was one of the main drivers, but there were people here, the mayor, Mohammed Hamiduddin, and Hamira Ahmed, Ghazala Arshad, Aizaz Sharif, Nusrat Suhail, Sarwat Wasim, and all of the other people, certainly the team from Zaytuna, Captain Hamza and her team that came, Ghaib and Shams, and all of those people. There were a lot of people that we could thank, but I want to thank all of you. And then I also want to remind you, we've been trying to get 12,000 strong. Imam Zayd said right now we're 12,000 weak. So we're trying to get 12,000 strong. And if you sign up for that, there's going to be a raffle afterwards for anybody who signs up for that, and make sure it gets put into the raffle chamber. Do I have a clicker? I do. Yeah, Bismillah. Yes? Mm-hmm. And obviously, yeah. But see, you shouldn't have done that, because see, Allah, very often, the people that aren't mentioned, it's the akhfiya. Allah hides certain people. And whenever I forget people, I always, because somebody says, oh, you didn't mention so-and-so. And I always think, subhanAllah, Allah just akhfahum. They just wanted to get that reward. We had a situation where we had a very prominent person who was profoundly upset because he was not honored in the way that he should have been. And I told him, in Mauritania, where I studied, the teachers that I studied with told me that if you ever do something sincerely for the sake of God, and not only do you not get credit for it, but people will either blame you for something else or completely ignore you, just remember, thabat al-ajr, that the reward is definitely with God. Whereas when you get credit, sometimes the credit is what you get. There are people that study, and when they meet God, this is the Sahih collection of Imam Muslim, when people meet God, he said, what are you? He said, I'm a scholar, I studied for your sake. He said, you're a liar, you studied to be called a scholar, and they called you a scholar. So now, that was your reward. And the person said, I fought for your sake. No, you fought to be called courageous. I gave for your sake. No, you gave to be called generous, and people called you that. So sincerity is at the root of our religion. I want to talk about, and also Shaykh bin Mahfoud, my teacher's son who's here tonight, Shaykh mentioned that Al-Aqra' ibn Habis gave all his money back when his iman was strengthened, which is one of the beautiful aspects of this religion, is that initially people come in very often for some benefits, but over time the iman gets stronger, and then they begin to benefit. Imam al-Ghazali went into the madrasa as an orphan for food and clothes, but as he learned and acquired knowledge, his sincerity grew, and he said in his famous statement, تَعْلَمْتُ الْعِلْمَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَأَبَى الْعِلْمُ إِلَّا أَنْ يَكُونَ لِلَّهِ. I learned knowledge for other than the sake of Allah, but knowledge refused to be other than for His sake. So I want to, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I want to just talk a little bit about what we're doing and what we plan on doing in the future. One of the things about Muslims, if you say liberal arts, they think, one, that not only are you voting for Bernie Sanders, but you're also learning basket weaving or painting. And this is a big problem in our community, is that a lot of people don't understand what the liberal arts are. And so I want to just talk a little bit about the liberal arts. We're calling this reviving a forgotten tradition amongst Muslims, because there is a beautiful book written by Mehdi Nokastin. He was an Iranian scholar, historian, who did his PhD at the University of Colorado. And he wrote a book called The Islamic Origins of Western Education. And it's a very interesting book. There is another book that was written by George Makdisi called The Rise of Colleges, arguing that it's highly probable that the way the college and the university emerged in Western civilization is a direct result of the interaction that Europeans had with the Muslims in seeing how they run their schools and colleges. They replicated that in the West. So, where did this idea come from of the liberal arts? The first thing, what our scholars tend to do is they look at the words themselves. Like when you study a book of usul al-fiqh, they say usul al-fiqh is murakkab min kalimatain. Al-usul wal-fiqh. And then they give you an explanation of what usul is and what fiqh is. Usul is foundations, fiqh is understanding. So this is the science of the foundations of the understanding of our religion. If you look at these two words, liberal is a word from a Latin word, liber, which means free. And arts is from a Latin word which means strength, and it's related to our word army. In English, it's called skill, and that's why arts and skills go together. So we think of the fine arts when we think of arts, but actually they're the useful arts, the fine arts, and the liberal arts. The liberal arts are those sciences that train the mind of a person traditionally in a way that would enable that person to live as a free person, free from the shackles of prejudice, free from the shackles of biased thought. It was in contradistinction to what are known as the servile arts. These are the arts that people learn in order to earn a living. The servile arts. So you learn vocations in order to learn a living so that you serve society. The liberal arts were there in order to free your mind to be able to think well. Where does it come from? There's an argument that comes from Pythagoras of Samos, the original idea of these arts. This was a mystical mathematician. People know the Pythagorean theorem, which he was most famous for, but he was a brilliant mathematician, but also one of the earliest liberal artists. But if you take it back further, you will find actually that much of this comes from India. India is the origin and source of a lot of our intellectual power that we've been given. And that knowledge spread. India gave us the zero. Logic begins in India. The first grammar book was written in India. So the Indians are one of the earliest of these great scholastic civilizations. So what is the history of the liberal arts in the Muslim world? One of the earliest colleges was Jami'atu Zaytuna in Tunis, founded in 731. If you look at these early colleges, they were mosque colleges. They were a masjid and a madrasa, or kulliyah, or jami'ah. We also have the Qarawiyyin in Morocco, in Fez, built by a woman, Fatima al-Fikriyya, and around 859. She was actually also a student. The lawh that she memorized the Quran on and studied knowledge is still in the Qarawiyyin, and I actually saw it. The sword of Muli Idris, the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ, is also there. This is actually a young version of me. Believe it or not, teaching grammar, that's the chair of grammar in the Qarawiyyin. Why do we call in the United States, why do we call these things that we have in universities the chair of engineering? The chair of, it doesn't make any sense if you think about it. Why would you call it that? Because in the Muslim world, the only person that got to sit on the chair was the teacher. Because the students sat on the floor. And so they called it kursiyo nahu, the chair of grammar. Kursiyo riyada, the chair of mathematics. And this, according to George Makdisi, moves into Europe. And this is the titles they gave them. This is Al-Azhar University, founded in 970 by the Fatimids, actually. And this is, I'll just stop here for a second. One of the biggest problems in our community is a type of provincialism, and by that I mean a type of prejudicial thinking in which anybody that doesn't agree with me is not only wrong about what they don't agree with me, about, but they're wrong about everything. The Fatimids were Ismailis. Al-Azhar University was founded during their reign in Egypt. The Fatimids had many positive things and they had negative things. The Muslims took what was positive and they left the rest. And this is one of the hallmarks of Islam. It's really sad. So many people got so upset about saying anything good about the study of Quran. Harper Perennial, one of the most important publishers in the world, published for the first time a Quran. Now, are there some problematic things in that Quran? As far as I'm concerned, as far as others are concerned, there are some things that are problematic. Does that mean we reject the whole book despite the incredible scholarship that went into it and the involvement, 10-year project? The fact that for the first time people are starting to understand the Quran? In fact, one CNN man called me up. This is a true story. He called me up and he said, why are the Muslims so upset about the study of Quran? It's the first time I've been able to read this book and really feel like I'm getting something out of it. And I just thought, that's an interesting question. Why are they so upset? Because, and I know the people didn't read the book. They just went right to the verses that they knew would be problematic. And they said, oh, there's a problem in the Quran. The same is true for so many things in our religion. The Zamakhshari, one of the great commentators, in fact, the single most important linguistic commentary on the Quran was written by a Mu'tazilite scholar. Did the Muslims throw that book away? No. It's honored to this day in our tradition, despite the fact that the man who wrote it was considered a heterodox Muslim. Another example, Al-Jahal, a brilliant scholar, again, from the Mu'tazilite tradition, considered heterodox. Are his books thrown away? No, they're honored. Ibn Taymiyyah himself said, I derived great benefit from the work of Ibn Arabi. He says this in his fatwa. I derived great benefit from the work of Ibn Arabi, Al-Hatimi, the famous Sufi philosopher from Andalusia. And he said it was his book, Fusus al-Hikam, that was the problem. So in other words, he benefited from one of his works, but he found problems in the other. Historically, this is the way the Muslims were. They were syncretists. They took wisdom wherever they found it, because the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min. Wherever, the wisdom is the lost property of the Muslim. Wherever he finds it, he has more right to it, or she has more right to it. And this is a problem in our community, is that anybody that doesn't agree with me is wrong, but they're wrong about everything. This is a real problem, and this is why we need to recognize that we're all in this together. And there are many, many good people out there that have different views about Islam than we have. Imam Zayd, myself, Dr. Hatem, we hope, inshallah, we consider ourselves Orthodox Muslims that follow a school of fiqh, a school of theology, a school of spirituality, Imam Junaid's school. This is the Orthodox tradition of the Muslims. But when we recognize that there's benefit out there, we should honor that benefit and not simply attack it. You can point out the problems, you can write papers on it, explain to other people, but this is a really important aspect. So this was founded by the Fatimids, by the Ismailis, and it became one of the great teaching centers of the Muslims. This is another, the University of Timbuktu, founded in 982. One of them, and this is one of the most important centers of learning. In fact, in Africa, this was a treasure that people came from all over to study in this incredible Sankuri University. Timbuktu recently, and there's a book that you should read, it's called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. And I read that book, and I'm honored to say that I actually know the badass librarian of Timbuktu, Shaykh Zubair, who is a student of our teacher, Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya. He came to Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya in the 1950s and studied with his father and also studied with the Shaykh. He went on to get a PhD. This is a man from Mali who went on to get a PhD at Sorbonne University. the Harvard of France. I mean, the French would be horrified for me to say that because they consider Harvard the Sorbonne of America. But anyway, the Harvard of France, right? We're Americans after all. The Harvard of France, Sorbonne, he got a PhD from that university. He went back and cataloged over 300,000 manuscripts in Timbuktu. This is what Islam did for Africa. These were Africans that became some of the most literate human beings in human history. And one of the greatest, Ahmed Baba Timbuktu, which is the man that Shaykh Zubair did his PhD dissertation on, when the fanatics took over Timbuktu. This is recently, people, these extremists took over Timbuktu, the Black Flags. They were so fearful that they hid all of the books in houses. And the Belgian government and the Germans actually organized with these librarians, two of them, one of them Shaykh Zubair and his student who lived in Timbuktu. They sent them special discs in order for them to put these manuscripts into discs that would protect them from water, and they sneaked them out over a period of time. They got the entire library of Timbuktu out because they were so afraid that these fanatics would burn all of this material because they considered it bid'ah and filled with Sufism and other things. Over 300,000 manuscripts. This was our civilization. This was our civilization. Timbuktu is one of the great learning centers. I actually almost died in Timbuktu. I got amoebic dysentery. I was incredibly sick. And I was saved by two French tourists. My friend, I couldn't even walk. I couldn't get out of bed. But Hassan Barrett, who was with me, we were both 18 years old. Hassan Barrett actually went out and told some tourists that their friend was like literally had blood everywhere and he couldn't get out of bed. They actually had flagyl with them, which is the specific antibiotic. So I could have been just a statistic of one of the many European travelers that died in Africa. But I wasn't. Zahiriya school, another one. Let me go back to that one. Look how beautiful the Muslims. One of the things that really struck me, I was at University of Berkeley the other day for talking at one of Dr. Hatim's classes that he teaches there, and I gave a lecture on Imam al-Ghazali. One of the things that really struck me was how ugly the classroom was. And it really bothered me. It was so ugly. And I was thinking, the Muslims always honored their knowledge by making the most beautiful environments to study in. And I guarantee you, if you were able to go to the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, it would have been the most beautiful place you've ever seen. Maybe not with the ornamentation, but I've been to some of the most beautiful places in Mauritania where they study in these just simple natural structures surrounded by a natural environment. And it's just so peaceful. There's a sakina that you get, a tranquility. But this is the great Zahiriya College of Syria. May Allah, inshallah, restore law and order to that place and bring salvation to those people and help all of the refugees. Well, what did they study at these places? The first thing and the most important thing that they really understood was revealed religion. But one of the interesting things about our scholars, and this is partly because of the Mu'tazilite experience, when the traditionalists were confronted with rationalism, one of the things that they realized was, if you say the Quran is true, and somebody says, well, how do you know it's true? And he says, because the Quran says so. This is called circular reasoning. And so our scholars realize that we have to predicate our knowledge on something that is actually precedes revelation, and that is intellect. This is not a Mu'tazilite position. This is mainstream Sunni and Shia Islam. This is literally the mainstream. This is not rationalism. They actually believed that it was the aqal, afala ta'qilun, that it was the intellect that was the foundation, and it was revelation that enlightened the intellect. But you have to know, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. You have to know that there's no God but God. How do you know that? Through rational thinking, through a process of thinking deeply about things. And this was, obviously this is a debate. People, some of the ulama here know about the Maturidi and the Ash'ari positions about tahkim al-aql, and I don't want to get into that debate. So it's a debate, I understand that. But this was the position that many, many Sunni scholars took. But the subjects that they really rooted their knowledge in are the trivium and the quadrivium. Nasiruddin al-Tusi, from the Shia tradition, was an extremely important scholar of what are called the aqliyat, the intellectual sciences. He was studied by Sunni scholars because his books were considered so important. He's also famous for his knowledge of what's called geography and trigonometry and these other areas. But he said in his beautiful book called Akhlaqi Tusi, he says that the foundation of all knowledge is the 3 language arts and the 4 numerical arts, the qualitative arts and the quantitative arts. So this is something that our scholars understood. In the trivium, you have grammar. These were called in Arabic as-sana'at al-thalath, the 3 skills or arts. Grammar, and this is not just learning the parts of speech. It was considered literature, prosody, learning. One of the sciences that we have lost was called ilm al-muhadarat. If you ask an alim today, and I'm not talking about really truly great ones, and I learned this from one of the great scholars, so I'm not making any claims personally, but if you ask most ulama today, what is ilm al-muhadarat? They wouldn't know. They would think it's a lecture. Because in 2001, Isaac Asimov's in Muslim history, we had people like Imam Suyuti. Imam Suyuti wrote on every subject under the sun. He actually wrote a book, الطريقة المنافى في صنعة الكنافة. He wrote a book called The Best Way to Make Kunafa. And this is one of the ulama of Egypt, right? And it's just amazing. And so our scholars, they love knowledge, and knowledge was widespread. I read a beautiful book about Egypt in the medieval period, from a Western point of view, in the medieval period, about cultural literacy in Egypt. The fact that every middle-class Egyptian prided him or herself on their libraries. And that when you went into an Egyptian middle-class house, you were struck by the books in their house. This was widespread in the Muslim world. Literacy was widespread in the Muslim world. There are more illiterate people today in the Muslim world than there were in the medieval period. This is simply a fact. Everybody knew how to read the Quran. That was just a basic foundation in Muslim culture and civilization. But many of them actually became quite learned. We have a whole, about between 10 and 15% of the notable scholars in every generation until the 16th century of Christian era. 10 to 15, think about this, 10 to 15% of every single generation of Muslims, of the notable scholars, were women. This is a testimony to our utter commitment to good governance. And that's why our scholars never gave the kings something that would enable them to misuse power. When they wrote Nasihat al-Muluk, Imam al-Ghazali's book, or Siraj al-Muluk by Abu Bakr al-Qurtushi, these were books that were there to guide our scholars, in order to our rulers, in order to make them better governors. One of the things that I suggested when I was in a gathering of notables in the Middle East, I suggested that they take these great classics and they abridge them and give them an easier way to understand it and distribute them amongst these rulers. Because it would seem that many of these rulers really need to understand what good governance is. Because we have a problem in many parts of the Muslim country, and the problem with bad governance is eventually the society collapses. And this is why we have failed states in so many Muslim places right now. It's bad governance. Now, there's another way to rectify governance. This is the way nobody wants to do it. They want to rectify the rulers, but they don't want to change themselves. Because as you are, so the people put over you. So that's another important aspect. So now, when you go to the European colleges, all of them were founded on the liberal arts. And if you read George Makdisi's
book, The Rise of Colleges, he gives a very solid argument that they were heavily influenced by Muslim culture, like the jubba that they wear. We know Roger Bacon, one of the most important. Even we know that one of the popes actually brought Arabic numerals to Europe after studying with Muslims in Spain, in Fez. He was in Fez, actually. And these are all historical facts. If you look, all of their alma mater, the nurturing mother, it's the soul mother. It's the place where the soul is nurtured by the mother. And study is what nurtures your soul. And then there, if you look at University of Oxford, there also, it's for the sake of God, right? This is why you're learning. So these are all beautiful. And then also here, the American colleges found on liberal arts. Veritas, Harvard. What does Veritas mean? Truth. Many people teaching at Harvard now no longer believe that there is objective truth. The truth is not something that you can actually achieve. Looks at Veritas. Light and truth is Yale, and Yale has Hebrew. Yale is celebrating 200 years of teaching Arabic. If you want to see an extraordinary dictionary, take Noah Webster's first American dictionary, 1828, and he tries to prove that English was originated from Hebrew, but what he ends up proving is many of the words actually go back to Arabic. And I don't know where they got the Arabic typesetting in 1828. They actually have a very nice font that they were using in the United States of America. We know that the first American to convert to Islam, George Bethune-English, who converted to Islam, and he was actually a contemporary of Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Jefferson actually read his book, which I read. I discovered this book in Jefferson's correspondence with Adams. He mentioned that he read George Bethune-English's travelogue up the Nile and found it very interesting. I decided to look it up. I found it online, a PDF, and I read it. Extraordinary, amazing. George Bethune-English got one of the highest distinctions at Harvard University when he did his master's thesis, proving that the Trinity was not found in the Bible, neither the Old or New Testament. George Bethune-English was a Unitarian. He learned Hebrew, Arabic, he knew Latin and Greek, and he learned Cherokee. He ended up going to Egypt as a Marine, sent there by the President of the United States to help the Egyptians improve their army, and he ended up converting to Islam in Egypt. He went up the Nile, and if you read it, it'll make you cry, because a Nubian boy got very sick, and he had been looking after him, and when they left a certain place, Bethune-English asked where was the Nubian boy. They said, oh, he was too sick, so we just left him there. He said, you just left him there? How did you do that? He said, no, go back and get him. They said, no, it's too late. He said, I'll pay whoever goes back and gets him. Somebody went back, but on the way, a Nubian man, a Sudanese, had found him and brought him on a camel to the caravan. When Bethune-English found this out, he asked to see the man. He wanted to give him money, and the man said, I didn't do that for money. I did it for the sake of Allah. And he has a much greater reward. You know what George Bethune-English said to him? Find me somebody in this place that understands the true meaning of the Quran. It's just so tragic. So this thing has been going on for quite some time. So,
iPhone, right?
Freddie's ever wrote this book. It's a good book. I think there's some problems with it personally, but overall, it's a good book. Freed's, I think he's trying. What he did say, Freed said that when he was in India, he learned by rote memorization. When he got to Harvard, for the first time he was challenged to think. And he said that this was the liberal arts. And he said what's fascinating to him and tragic in a sense is that at a time when India is getting interested in the liberal arts, seeing it as perhaps the secret weapon of the Americans are abandoning their liberal arts tradition for the thing that the Indians have been pursuing for a very, very long time, which is what they call math, engineering, science, and technology, right? STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. These STEM, obsession with STEM, which has been the Muslim obsession for a very long time. They forgot their own tradition. So this is the problem. There's a move towards specialization and vocational training due to an increasingly complex society. So you need specialization. So
also the president of the Protestant school in Beirut, the American university. He said that the Muslim education of the Middle Ages is rapidly being superseded by schools and universities which are both modern and secular. This widespread movement is so recent that it is impossible to tell how it will affect the cultural and social life of Islam. Well, if you want to know how it's affected it, look at all of these movements. Look at what's happening in the Muslim world and what's happened to our religion. This is how it's been affected. It is clear, however, that in this age of chaotic change, when members of the rising generation are confused by bewildering doubts, the reformers must not neglect the basic principles of medieval education, which were a search of spiritual truth and faith in the reality of Allah. That was a Christian Protestant. The Umayyad College and College of Syria, built in 706 of the Common Era. This was one of the great teaching centers of our civilization. And look at it now. When you look at knowledge, knowledge is the organization of facts and data. What are facts? Factum in Arabic means it's what is made. Who made a fact? God made facts. What is data? Data in the Latin language means what is given. It's what's been given to you to understand your world, your alam. Organizing facts and data lead to knowledge. But knowledge is not enough. You have to have understanding. Because knowledge is knowing that. You can know, information is knowing that. You can know that a noun is a part of speech. But knowledge is knowing that there are 7 parts of speech, or 8 parts of speech. Logic is understanding what those parts of speech are. But then you have to have wisdom, which is the wherefore of the knowledge, the reason for that. What are the reasons for those parts of speech? How are they used? And so knowledge, understanding, and wisdom is at the essence of our tradition. And we have focused too much on knowledge and too little on understanding and wisdom. And so we have people that have knowledge, but they lack understanding and wisdom. One of the few people that I've found in my lifetime in the Muslim world that I think has wisdom is Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya. Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya recently was asked about jihad. He said, نحن نؤمن بقدسية النص. We believe in the sanctity of the text. The text has a sanctity that we can't argue with. الذين يجاهدون في سبيل الله. جاهدوا في سبيل الله بأموالكم وأنفسكم. Jihad is part of our religion. But he said, but we don't believe in the sanctity of the application of the nas. That is not a sanctified reality in our religion. It is wisdom to know when to apply the verse, in what situation to apply the verse. I once, and anybody who knows the Anglo-Saxons, and this is my Irish speaking right now, anybody that knows the Anglo-Saxons know that cynicism is a profoundly embedded quality of many Anglo-Saxon people. The British are some of the most cynical people, especially when you get to the upper classes, right? Very cynical. We were being interviewed by a BBC journalist, and if you want cynicism, BBC journalist. He interviewed Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayyah. At the end of the interview, he turned to me and he said, I think this is the first time in my life I've ever been in the presence of a wise man. It was just such a testimony, you know. So, there's a lot of good things about the English. Right? So, that's my Muslim speaking now. This is a beautiful picture of Botticelli. It's the young man being introduced into the 7 liberal arts by who? By grammar, the personification of grammar. Going from the sublime to the ludicrous. Yes, Winky. Yes, a winky face is correct. But in ancient times, the semicolon was actually used to separate archaic written devices known as complete sentences. Now, if you think that's a joke, I don't think you know what's going on in our schools anymore. So, our scholars differentiated between ignorance that's compounded and ignorance that's simple. In the Catholic tradition, they call it innocent ignorance and arrogant ignorance. Simple ignorance is knowing that you don't know, and that's remediable by knowledge. Compound ignorance is thinking you know, but what you actually know is wrong. And that is impossible to eradicate. In a democracy, we have always had to worry about the ignorance of the uneducated. Today, we have to worry about the ignorance of people with college degrees. That was Thomas Sowell, right? Can I get the sound? Hey. Can you give me the sound?
Where I come from, we have universities, seats of great learning, where men go to become great thinkers. And when they come out, they think deep thoughts, and with no more brains than you have. But they have one thing you haven't got, a diploma. Therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Universitatis Comitiatum e Pluribus Unum, I hereby confer upon you the honorary degree of Ph.D.
PhD?
That's Doctor of Thinkology.
Sum of the square roots of any two sides of an isosceles triangle is equal to the square root of the remaining side. Oh, John, I've got a brain.
Now, I don't know if you noticed, but he totally mangled the Pythagorean theory. Did you notice that? See, he got it all wrong. Because now he had a diploma. Before he knew he was ignorant and that he didn't have a brain. But then the moment he got this picture, the diploma, he suddenly thought he knew something, and there he is mangling the Pythagorean theory, saying, oh, joy, he was much better off before he got that diploma. Because at least he knew he didn't know, he could remedy it. But the Wizard of Oz, which we call modern academia, does this magical thing in which it bestows diplomas on people that have learned nothing in 4 years. And what's amazing, and I hate to say this, but undeniably there are brilliant people that come out of these colleges and universities, and America has some of the best colleges and universities in the world. This is undeniable. But many people that go through 4 years of college learn nothing. And you want to know where I got that from? I got that from the Department of Education study on American colleges and universities, in which almost 50% of people that study in colleges for 4 years actually do not increase their knowledge. It's extraordinary. But this is our own Department of Education admitting this. So we do have a crisis, as was said earlier. Are students worse off today than before? Well, in many ways, things don't change all that much, but in other ways they do, and they're certainly less prepared coming into college than they've ever been before, because our grammar schools have been eliminated, and now we have grade schools and we have high schools that are not teaching them these basic knowledges. Almost all universities now are doing remedial work. They don't like to call it remedial work because it makes people feel bad, so they call it developmental work. They have to develop their skills, but it's actually remedial work. And so this is a major problem that we have in our culture. I'm just gonna finish very quickly now. I just wanted to show you something that we're going to be doing. And this, our provincialism said I was only sent as a teacher of knowledge. But one of the things that we are going to do in the future, in the near future, we want to renovate this beautiful building that we got. This was originally a Jewish frat house at UC Berkeley. And then it became a Franciscan seminary, a college, but the Catholic. And now it's a Muslim college. So it's gone through the Abrahamic process. We have a beautiful building. We're going to renovate it, inshallah. This is the building. So we also want to acquire faculty and student housing so that we can lower the cost of running the college. It's an initial heavy investment, but long-term it's a very strategic investment so that we rent at, Berkeley's a very expensive area, we can rent to our faculty housing near the college. This is what many colleges do, and then house our students. We're also working, and I'm actually meeting tomorrow with a brilliant scholar, and Dr. Hatem and I, Imam Zaid, are meeting with the head of one of the Turkish centers of higher learning in Istanbul. We're actually going to be developing an MA PhD program with the Graduate Theological Union so that our students can go into MA and PhD programs. They can be with us for a longer time and really get deep into texts. This is, I have to tell you, this takes many colleges several years to get to. And we have been afforded an incredible situation by being up on the Holy Hill. And I told some of the people up on the Holy Hill, it's called the Holy Hill because there are several colleges, religious colleges on the hill. There are 10 religious colleges on the hill. So we have a Jewish center, we have Orthodox center, we have a Buddhist center, we have a Hindu center, we have a Dominican college, a Jesuit college, a couple of Protestant colleges. And I told them, we're not coming to be holier than thou on the hill, but we want to make the hill holier in any case. And so they were very welcoming to us, and they want to work with us so that we can have MA PhD programs. I want to tell you, the GTU is a joint degree with UC Berkeley. That will mean that our MA and PhD students will have access to all of the courses, including the language courses that are being taught at UC Berkeley. UC Berkeley is in the top 10 colleges in the United States. It's one of the most important colleges in several areas. So this is what we're working on. The Prophet ﷺ said in a very important hadith in Imam al-Tirmidhi, he said, يَحْمِلُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ مِنْ كُلِّ قَرْنٍ عُدُولُهُ. This knowledge will be carried in every generation by upright people. What do they do? He said they do three things. يَنْفُونَ عَنْهُ تَحْرِيفَ الْغَالِينَ. They refute or negate the perversions of the extremists. And then he said, وَانْتِحَانَ الْمُبْطِلِينَ, and the lies, calumnies, and fabrications of nullifiers. People that want to nullify the religion, the mubtilin, intihal al-mubtilin, with ta'wil al-jahilin, and the understanding of the ignorant. So they educate the ignorant, they refute Islamophobes, and they refute extremists. This is the role of the scholar. Very few of our scholars today are doing this role. And so we want to create a research center at Zaytuna College to restore the primary narrative of normative Islam, which refutes extremist ideology, misinformation of Islamophobia, and widespread ignorance. The objectives, we want to do media engagement and training, challenging Islamophobia, working with Dr. Hatem's extraordinary center at UC Berkeley, refuting extremist ideology, curriculum development for both adults and youth, digital media, publications, interface strategy and engagement, educational seminars. These are all objectives that we have. So that's what he's having. Where's my video? Catherine. Thank you. So this is one of the things that we have real plans for. It's one of the things, many colleges have research centers, and this will be it will be in one way independent, but it will be it will be within the context of the college, so it will have a separate staff and people who are doing things. We've got some extraordinary talent that are literally ready to go to work in doing this. And this is something that I feel very strongly about. The Provincial Islam told us that we had to defend our religion. In that hadith, it's very clear. It's an obligation. When you don't see people doing it, it becomes a fard ayn on you to do it. And so this is something Imam Zayd certainly has been doing, Dr. Hatton is doing, I've been trying to do, but it's something that needs to be done in a more organized effort. And this is one of our plans. We have a lot of real plans, and I think you can see how far we've come in a short time. But they say it takes 20 years to be an overnight success, and that's certainly been true because we founded the Institute in 1996. And so we're here. Somebody came up to me after a fundraiser and said, you know, I can't believe they gave you $500,000. We had a fundraiser last week, and we could only raise $60,000. I said, how long has your organization been around? He said 6 months. I said, you're doing very well. All right, because we've been around for 20 years. So it takes, and I know Imam Zayd, Imam Zayd has been working tirelessly for this community on a lot of different fronts. But Zaytuna, he carried Zaytuna when I was, after 9/11, when I ended up having to go and do a lot of damage control for our community, and I did the best that I could. But he carried the college. It was Imam Zayd and Dr. Hatton that compelled me to start the college a year before I wanted to start it. So it's been an incredible journey. I've just been blessed with the companionship that I've been blessed with. And I'll conclude with these are my final words. One of the most important Americans in the liberal arts tradition is a man named W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois had a vision for the African American community. His vision was in contrast to another great African American's vision, Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington felt that African Americans should learn crafts and skills, and that they should become economically independent, and through gradualism enter into the mainstream of white America. W.E.B. Du Bois thought that the single most important thing for African Americans was to learn the liberal arts. Because he wanted a community of thinkers, of people that could really understand the problems at a deeper level and address those problems at that level. And he was one of those great thinkers. And he ended up teaching, went from Massachusetts, from a relatively liberal environment, even at that time, to Atlanta, Georgia. And he taught at a preeminent university, a liberal arts college in Atlanta, Georgia. And he believed in what he called the talented 10th. That if we could just get 1 out of every 10 to go through this education. He later modified this view because he saw the importance of other leadership in the community, not just from the intellectual cadre, but from other places. But he really felt if we could just get 1 out of 10 to go through this education, we could transform the community. And Dunbar High School was part of that vision, which produced some of the most important African-American leadership in the United States. Dunbar College was an amazing, Dunbar High School was an amazing liberal arts high school where they learned Latin and Greek and studied the classics. And it produced brilliant African-Americans who became really leaders, not just of Black America, but in the community at large. And they had the best name that I've ever heard for a school team. Their sports teams were called the Dunbar Poets. And I just thought that was just so fantastic to have a football team of poets. Right? But that community was a community of learners, and that's what we need to restore, the centrality of learning in our community. The African American community has gone through incredible hardship in this civilization and is still up against an incredible fight. The American Muslims, I think we have failed that community because one of the legacies of the African American community is the religion of Islam. When you read Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, what it's really about is how Europe underdeveloped Muslim education in Africa. Because that was where their education was, that was where their scholarship was, and we should restore it. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you all so much.